Hi, good morning. My name is Ivan Bonilla, and I'm the director of the area of sports psychology from the Escuela Universitaria Real Madrid, Universidad Europea. As you know, today we are going to make a roundtable called Sports Psychology Challenges and Opportunities. As you know, the sports psychology sector is growing, and there is a huge demand for professionals in this area. So today, I bring with you some of our experts and teachers from our program to discuss a little bit about our main challenges and opportunities. So, with no more hesitation, I'm going to introduce our experts. First of all, we have Dr. Andrea Firth. She's a British
Good
psychological.
evening.
Yeah. Hi, Andrea. She's from the British Psychological Society Chartered Psychologist. She's a registered practitioner with BUPA and member of the Healthcare Professional Council. She specializes in performance enhancement, and her expertise includes working with a variety of national and international sports elite athletes. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, Andrea. It's a pleasure.
Hi, Ivan. Thank you for inviting me to this.
Our second expert is Antoni Tello. He's a sports psychologist. He works from different athletes and sports. I know that right now he's working with with professional and talent development on tennis and with different clubs from tennis. And he works in performance and improving through psychological work. So hi, good afternoon, Antoni. It's a pleasure.
Hi, Ivan. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to this meeting.
And our last expert, and also it's a good friend who has been working from different clubs and in different situations from sport and sports industry, Pablo Lopez, a strength and conditioning coach from Football Club Bayern Basketball, and also he works more in the private sector as a player performance development in sports and esports. So good afternoon, good morning, Pablo.
Thank you, Ivan, and it's a pleasure for me to be here.
So we are going to start with some general questions about our sector, the sports industry, the sports ecosystem, and I'm going to start with a really general question, and I'm going to start with Andrea. My first question is, how do you think the sports ecosystem is right now? Because as we have saw a lot of development in the last years. At least, for example, here in Spain, in the 92, we start growing, and it's a sector who is growing more and more. So, what do you think, for your international perspective, how is the sport ecosystem right now?
I think this is quite a complex and quite a delicate topic. As you know, sport is growing and it doesn't seem to be dropping off anytime soon. I think it's an industry that will continue to grow. But I also think that there is a juxtaposition, if you like, between the stakeholders, which is quite balanced and quite unique depending on the nature of the sport. For example, if we talk about high-level sport, then clearly the fans and its spectators are very vital to the sport and necessary for their lucrative survival. If there are no fans, there's no money in the sport. So because of this, then these spectators are able to provide a fundamental stressor and have quite a big psychological impact on the other stakeholders. And you could also, on the other hand, argue that the opposite is true, that because of the fans' personal investment, their financial investment, their emotional and psychological investment into their team or their athlete that they are supporting, then the stakeholders, the players and so on can put stresses on them. So there's this bi-directional relationship which is quite unique to any individual sport. Mm-hmm. Then we add in social media, which is a way that these fans can have their voices heard. And sometimes that can be very helpful, and other times it can be quite detrimental to the organization and specifically to individual players. or individual athletes. So this is one way that I think fans can put quite a great deal of pressure on stakeholders, on other stakeholders who are involved in their team.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing we need to consider is the power dynamics between stakeholders. And this is quite interesting because there is a temptation sometimes to treat athletes like a mechanistic body, almost like a piece of meat that you buy, you sell, you use, you get rid of if they're no longer up to scratch, and so on. And so in that stance, I'm of the view that you would treat people, or you should treat people, according to your own wants, your own values, your own personal philosophy. And yet sometimes it can be quite difficult to maintain those values and that personal philosophy within the ecosystem that you're within. Now, we're talking about high level sport, but of course there's different ecosystems depending on the nature of the environment. So sport is very different to recreational sport within the community, which is different to sub-elite and elite sports. It varies sport to sport. We all recognize a big difference between the ecosystem of football versus the ecosystem of rugby. But of course, there are similarities between all sports as well, but there are unique differences. Another thing we need to consider is how inclusive is the sport? You know, are LGBT people recognized? Is it open to all genders? All ethnicities, all religions, whether it is able-bodied and disabled people. So one way of ensuring a good ecosystem is grassroots upwards, including all people and making it inclusive to everyone.
Okay.
So you asked me, what is the state? I think there's a lot more to be done. I think we can get there, but we need to work very hard on it. And, the people here up in the sport need to trickle down to the lower levels to make it inclusive. And then hopefully that inclusivity, that healthy ecosystem will translate to all levels of the sport.
Yeah, I completely agree. What I most like it is the part of the values, no, in that global ecosystem right now. I think it's one of the key parts for the club, no, the challenge of how I keep my values while I need to connect with international people from different cultures, from different perspectives, from different point of view. So for me, that's one of the key points in the key challenge of general clubs organization. So for me, no, taking that part, I will ask you, Pablo, about, do you think that right now values are one of the key parts to as a challenge for clubs, or do you think that we are facing other kind of challenge for a club from your perspective of sports science?
For sure, it's like the main focus when you start in a club. When you join a club or when you are starting to make a team, for example, you have to take your values inside of it, because you are getting people from all around the world. Okay, you get to a club that is international, so you are getting players from every part of the world. So your main focus is to make them connect, so then they can play good. But your main focus, it should be so they connect inside of the court, inside of the game, and also outside. They respect each other. They have the same goals. They have the same respect to each other. It doesn't depend from where you are. Just you are in this place at this moment, so you have to take care of what you do exactly now. So you need everyone to be in the same way, in the same street. So you reach the same goals. Like you reach the peak of the team.
Yeah, I completely agree. And for that point of view, one of the main, one of the main professionals or science areas is sports psychology, who can work in that
Yes.
part, of team cohesion,
Okay.
values, culture of a club, and also the part of the inclusion
think Ivan's dropped off.
Yeah.
But it was true. Like when you have to make the cohesion of the group, you need
Yeah.
a professional for doing it. Like you can do it. Even I'm a strength and conditioning coach. You don't need a strength and conditioning coach to do it. Okay, you can be good at that, but we need a psychologist to do the group cohesion.
Yeah, and also as my point of view as sports psychologist, I think it's one of the hardest things to work, because when you enter a new team or a club
Yes.
that is already built, a lot of people talk about values like if it was a brand, like if it was
Yeah.
marketing, like, oh, my values are to put hard work, to respect, and then you see things in the club. This is not what you are talking about yesterday about your values.
It doesn't fit to what they think.
Exactly. So I think that the most important work or important part in the values is not creating them, because when you have a good relationship with the players or with the club, people start to tell what they feel.
Yes.
The problem with the values is like to taste them, to be a model with the values you are.
Yeah.
Like you can put the values, but you need to get them to the players. It doesn't mean anything that you put some values, you put some rules in the club, and the people in the middle of the season just decide to do another thing. You have to take these values and continue with them until the end of the season.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think
now,
it's also about aligning your values, the institution's values, with those players, so that you
Yes.
bring that, so they're in with each other.
yeah. Now, can
Sorry,
you see me?
Ivan,
Can you
you're
hear
saying?
me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yes.
Sorry, no, my connection, the problems of modern world. And yeah, so yeah, I thank you because you continue. I can leave from the masterclass and there's no problem because I think I give you the seats to continue for that chat. But now I take all that ideas and I was talking about the key part of the sports psychologist who is a main role on from facing all this challenge. And now Tony, I will ask you, do you think that right now a sports psychologist's role is well recognized in the sports industry, or is it still introducing in that sports industry? What do you think it's like the moment right now of that role?
I think that now the teams are more open to work with a sports psychologist. To be realistic, like the role of the sports psychologist was born a long time ago, but they were not talking about. So I think it's thanks to all the players, to all the high performance athletes that was show about how is important the mental work. That then now the sports, the club, the organizations are more open to work with mental part, and also to put effort and money, because a lot of clubs, they say that okay, sports psychology is so important. I think it's something that is crucial for my players or for my athletes, but then they refuse to put an effort to work with them. So I think that is during this nowadays that they are more open to say, okay, this role is good, and we can put effort to have this sports psychologist in our club, in our organization, to work with them. I think that the difference between the past is like now they are putting effort to work on the mental part.
Okay. Yeah, we have some questions from the audience. We will answer them at the end of the master class in the last 15 minutes. Okay. Just but I encourage everyone who's listening us to write any question they have. And taking that, Tony, I have a question about that. Is where do you think like a sports psychology role is more difficult right now, on high performance or talent development? What is more difficult to introduce our work, our day by day, or where to make like our role not it's not important, it's like just to have value in our role in high performance or in talent development.
I think like in high performance, maybe it's like easy to introduce yourself, because right now in these moments we are in like in a phase that you have to still present what are you going to work. I mean, for example, now a football coach or a fitness coach doesn't have to present what is going to work when he goes to a club. Right now, a little bit more or less, but we still have to present what we are work. So when we talk about high performance, is more easy to introduce ourselves as a we are going to be a sports psychologist and we are going to help the players to be more mentally prepared. I think that more in personal development is a little bit more difficult, but I don't think it's less important. I think that both of them or both of words are so important, but I think that high performance is easy because let's say that you have these skills that you work there to for his performance.
Mm-hmm. And do you agree with that, Andrea? That what's your perception of our role? Where is more difficult to start, or if you think that we have equal challenges in both fields, or is your perception about our role in the sports industry?
I think that a lot of governing bodies now are recognizing the importance of having sports psychologists at academy level so that you build upon the fundamental skills, psychological skills that the athlete needs when they transition from into elite sport at senior level. And I think that's really important. And also it gives them the foundation upon which they can build psychological literacy and strength so that, they're less I'm not sure that they're less likely, but they are helped to cope with the stresses of sport. When it gets to elite level, I kind of feel that the athletes already have a way of working. So it's harder, I think, to impose stuff onto that. And you have to find a unique way of working the athlete already does. And it's I don't know what the word is. At the same time, it's paradoxical because they need quick results, but what they do is already quite ingrained. So that then takes time to change. So it is quite a different, for me, it's been a very different experience working with adult elite athletes than with academy and in some ways it's easy academy because there's less habits to break. And you would be very surprised. You think, they're elite, they have good mental skills already, and of course they do, but they're not always the best that they and that's always a little bit surprising, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. In that case, Andrea, I have the similar perception about high performance and talent development, because it's also, I have the same perception that sometimes working with high performance athletes is quite difficult because they have the habits. You have to work in more power relationship, in different power relationship of the club. The results has to be done for yesterday, not for today, and it's like with more pressure. And it's also true that for talent development, sometimes it's quite difficult to make them understand why are you in talent development, because they usually understand I'm here to make you performance better or to deal with the pressure of the next match, who is in the finals of the championship or the league. So for talent development, it's more difficult. And for now, Pablo, this is why I bring you to here, no? Because you are not you are from the other side. You are usually the one who we told to tell them, this is our work, this is how we work with talent development, this is how we work with your high performance athletes. So for your point of view, why do you need a sports psychology? What's your perception of sports psychology, of that in talent development, in high performance?
That's
There are
why
different roles.
I wanted to separate the both things. Now, talking about player development, I think it's so much necessary because some of them just want to reach professional. So they have so much pressure. Some of them are big prospects. So already they have agents, they have brands that are interested in them. And they have so much pressure, so much load, so much everything around them that they need someone to work with them. I think it's harder to work with player development, okay, because they are not as much open-minded that the ones that are in elite. Because let me explain. When you reach the elite, you are already in the elite, right? So now your goal is to stay in the high performance in the elite the much that you are able to. So for staying in the elite the longer time, you need someone to help you. So I think they are more open-minded in terms of working with sports psychologists than the young ones, because they already know that they have to work a lot to stay in the high performance, to stay in the best clubs, to stay in the best leagues. So they need the help from everyone. When they are veterans, they already know that, okay, I need a sports psychologist, I need these figures to help me to stay here for 5 more, 6 more years. It's not the same that in player development, they have 14 years old, probably most of them are winning, earning millions. So they think, okay, I have to stay in the professional one. I have to reach. So why I need the help of this one? I just need to train. No, you don't need to train. You need this professional, this professional, this professional, so I can reach in my peak performance to this level.
Okay, and now you have brought me to a question that, okay, we agree that talent development is like sometimes more challenging, no? Because you have to work more to
Mhm.
understand what's your work, to work them because they are less open-minded. But
Yes.
maybe we are forgetting one of the key agents or the key no or the key parts of when we are in talent development that usually are the families, no, the
Yes.
part of the family that for me I have been working a lot with families usually when I'm in talent development more sometimes I work more with the families than
The
not with
family.
the lead because there's a lot more to work with them. So for me it's the key part of do you think that sports psychologists can help on that relationship? Because usually I always found two kind of clubs or talent development academies. The club who is like a friend of the family, who is really involved the family on everything, in everything. It has like the same opinion and power like the coach or the sports psychologist, or the other side of the no, or we flip the coin. The club who is like no red flag, no, the parent and no families are a red flag. We are not going to talk with them, not going to give them so much info. So I never found like a
I
equilibrium
mean,
or a
intermediate.
picture
Yeah.
of strategy. So, what do you think about that role of families from the area of sports psychology? What do you think, for example, Tony, about our role or the key part of sports psychology here with families?
For me, a priority also when I'm working with development players is like to meet the family, because for two ways. Like, first of all, we are talking about people who's under 18, so I want to involve the family in the process, and also if the family also support the player to have sports psychology or also support this way, it's also information for you. So it's not only that you are going to help the player, it's also that you are going to work with the family to, as a team, let's say, work with the for the better for the player. So I think that the family is important, and also at least try to make this first connection with the family. If the family doesn't want to, then you have to look for these strategies or other ways. But I think that connect with the family when you work with this type of players is more than I need.
Yeah, and also, um, Pablo, what's your perception about because I was saying I'm going to talk now as the same to Andrea, but it's like we are like three psychologists versus one coach. So it's like now, what's your perception about that part of the family? Because usually when I talk with coaches, they have a different perception because they are more in the day by day.
No,
That usually they
I
talk
think
about
that
this.
for working with, like in terms of player development, you have to know the environment of the player. Just before starting with working with him, you have to know what's around this player. We are talking about habits, we are talking about routines, and we are talking about family.
Mhm.
Like, for me, the one of the most important things of for starting working with this guy. Okay, how is the relationship with his family? How close is him to them? How can we work? How can I talk with them so we can improve the times that we are training, the times that we are working with this guy? So for me, it's a must that sports psychologists also and strength and conditioning coach just work with the environment of these
Mhm.
players. We are talking about family, daily habits, and routines.
Okay. Yeah, and your perception, Andrea, it's like the same for families. No, it's like full relationship with families, or it's quite different. Yeah,
With
yeah. Go on, Andrea.
women and younger players, the family is very vital. The work I'm doing in with elite football, I don't really see the families very much. But work I've done, I don't really have many young players right now. Most of my players are adults at the time. But when I do work with young players, I try to involve the family as much as possible, because clearly, if you can get them on board and talk to them about how they talk, what their views are, how they can support the athlete to adopt the mental skills that you want them to have, it's going to help. So yeah, for me, the family is very vital in working with the athlete.
Okay, and now I will move a little bit from now. We start talking about some engines, some of the families, the role of psychology. Now I'm going to move to another, not to another, to another theme, to another subject, and like it right now, it for me it's like let's gonna talk about the staff. And now you are part, as one of our main colleagues, and Pablo, I'm going to ask you directly of how a sports psychologist can help you in your day by day as a strength and conditioning coach.
Well, the first thing that you have to know, like an strength and conditioning coach, you have to manage the players that you have in the gym. So you need to make group cohesion and also motivation for these players to understand what are they training for. Okay, we have a goal, like it's in 1 year ago, for example, that is the final of the competition. Okay, so you have to make the microcycles, the microcycles to reach this goal. Okay, so you have to work in the mental also on the physical one to reach this goal. So when we talk about, okay, we have to work the goal cohesion, so I have to explain these guys, what are we training, power explosive. So I need to get inside of their heads so they understand why are we doing this one.
Okay, and the part of the injuries, no, or the psychology of injuries, you think that we can also help you, and with the physiotherapists,
Yeah, for
with
sure.
everyone, we can
Like this.
help on there or not?
I forgot of that topic. Yeah, for sure. You need someone to stay close to the sportman, like to the sport, so he can help him during the rehab. The first, I don't know how to say, like the first steps are the hardest ones for this player because he's immediately the injured and he has to the chronic phase. So he needs someone to be close to him to, okay, in 3 months we are going to be okay. You need to be now in a good mood so we can reach to these 3 months. If you stay in a bad mood, it's not going to be 3 months, it's going to be 6, for example.
Okay, and also, Andrea, what do you think are our key roles we can work with staff, with the staff, with coaches? What are other tasks that we can make with injuries and counsel them for group cohesion? But do you think there are other topics or other main areas we can work with them?
In my experience, I've worked with the physios and the support staff to help support the athlete both settling into the club so that they feel part of the environment as quickly as possible. If they have issues whereby, for example, it was mentioned earlier that sometimes you have foreign players that come into a club, and there's this expectation that the player should pick up the nuances and the slang and the atmosphere of the club straight away, but actually it takes time to do that, and it may be that the player feels a little bit lost. So you can work with the support staff to get them ingrained within the culture of the club a little bit faster. For example, you could the people who do the catering to do some meals that come from to have an option of meals that come from that player's country. We might explain to coaches and support staff that actually there is a slower processing when you're speaking in a language that's a language. It may be that you don't respond as fast as the other players because of that slower processing. There are many ways I think that a sports psychologist can help the player to ingrain into the culture of the club, and definitely working with people who work in rehabilitation. You know, there are things you can do to mentally prepare the player for getting back to full-time play and full-time engagement in their sport.
Yeah, return to play.
And it works much better when you work in tandem with each other rather than in separate units. So the sports psychologists doing their thing and the strength and conditioning people are doing their thing. If they can work together and come to the player as a cohesive unit, I think it's much more beneficial to that player.
Completely agree about that main role of us, with the coaches. And as we can show that we have like a lot of areas to work with. Usually when I started studying from sports psychology, I always was asking like, I can only work with high performance athletes. It's the only field I can work with them. But no, in this round table, we are seeing that there's a lot of places we can work more in the head of the organization with the values, culture, how we make cohesion with new players who are coming, or we can work with talent development only with families, or we can work with coaches, just with strength and conditioning coaches in the gym, and with the rehabilitation. So there's a lot of the fields. And now I'm going to take some of the questions of our audience, because I have some questions, but I think that some of them are quite more interesting. So I'm going to start with one of them that is like one of the members of the audience has asking us like, and I'm going to ask for Tony, is like, because he's like the youngest who has been entering in the sports industry, in the sports in all the area, etc. And I'm asking Tony, do you think like, is sports psychology a difficult field to get into? Not getting into as a sports psychologist in the area of or in the ecosystem of sports without any background in sports. It doesn't matter if it's more amateur or semi-professional or professional, but it's a common question. I like it because it's like a common question I have. It's mandatory to have been an athlete or a professional athlete or a high-performance athlete to become a sports psychologist.
My answer is no, but also yes. I mean, as a sports psychologist, one of the abilities you have, skills you have to develop is like to be open-minded. So maybe you are going to work with players that they play a sport that you never practice, but it's so important that you like get a lot of information about this sport, about the rules, about the high performance, about the amateur, about everything about this sport, that you can understand also the vocabulary is going to use, because every sport has his own vocabulary. So if the athletes see you that you are not getting in this vocabulary, also it's going to be hard for you to connect with these players. So it's really neat to have a background. No, because maybe you are going to work with a sport that this sport is not able for you, but it's so important that you try to get a lot of information and also advice if you had the chance to have a try of this sport. Yes, but it's so important to have a lot of information with this sport to understand the way they talk.
Completely agree here, Tony. I remember when I started with, I was swimmer. I started with the water polo players, and I was going in the afternoons usually to play water polo, like in incognito mode, like no one is gonna see me, but I'm going to play a little bit of water polo, not to understand the differences between swimming and and water polo. So for me, it's also a key part. It's not the background; it's more about if you know enough about the mechanics or the differences or the key parts of that sport that you are going to work on. So maybe it's easier to start in your own field. No, if you're a you has been a swimmer working with swimmers. If you come from basketball, as I know from Pablo, no, maybe it's easier to start with basketball players. No, it's quite easier. And taking again, no, that question, it's like, do you think that it's mandatory always to be like a super expert or of the sport that you are going to work? And that question goes for Andres. Like, you have to be always an expert of that sport, or once you are more expert, you have more expert type of general sports psychology, how you work, how you manage the different the balances. it's easier to just going into a different sport that you maybe have no idea?
That was for me, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's not necessary to be an expert in sport. I think in that specific sport, I think sometimes it can be a little bit of a hindrance because you can assume things based on your experience of the sport, which there is a temptation to put things on the athlete or to understand things from a very narrow field of vision, where when you don't know about the sport, you're much more open and the athlete will teach you, you will ask the questions and you will be much more open and there'll be less bias in your knowledge already. However, that said, I used to play a lot of tennis to a decent standard. And when I first started as a sports psychologist, I was working with tennis players mostly. And I could understand the terminology, I could understand what they were talking about, and it was easy from that perspective. But I do think that, especially with new psychologists, you have to be very careful that you are not crossing any boundaries that you wouldn't cross if you didn't have that intimate knowledge of the sport.
Yeah, I completely agree, Andrea. But also for me, it's like usually it's also dangerous to be like an expert of that sport or have the background of that sport, because sometimes you can think about like, well, I'm the coach or the sports psychologist, or I'm here the athlete talking as a sports psychologist about what you have to do to become a high performance athlete. So it's quite difficult because sometimes some of the best interventions I have done are with sports that I had no idea. And one example is the area of esports, the electronic sports, that I had no idea of that area. And it's like the best, the last field I has been working, and for me, it's where my job has been done more ethically, with more care and with the best quality. And part of that, the privilege is that I had no idea of that field. So some of the questions I make is like quite strange and make like all the others say, well, it's true. Why are we always training only 45 minutes when the match is like half an hour? Yeah, and it's only because I was new, I had no idea, and I was making questions of like, and yeah, an amateur. So I think it's also interesting, but it's true that when you are new and you have no idea of the sport, you can cross some, yeah, you can make more mistakes or cross some lines that you have not to cross. So it's also true. And taking that, I'm going to ask you, Pablo, with imagine that you have two different kind of sports psychologists, one who has been a professional athlete of that sport, for basketball, for example, and another sports psychologist with a lot of experience, but from a different field. What do you feel more comfortable? From someone who knows a lot of the sport, someone who is just a good professional of sports psychologist, or an easier question, what are like the main abilities or the main characteristics that you say, okay, I feel more comfortable with that kind of professional than not another kind of professional? Because maybe it's not about if he's an expert or not of the sport, it's another kind of key parts. What are like the key parts or the key characteristics?
For me, the key part of a professional, I'm not talking about only just psychologists, like the thing that I just look the most when I just enter the field, this field, the sports field, is how is the professional reaching the sportman? How is the professional going to reach the sportman about, okay, I'm this one, I'm going to help you with this one, we're going to do this one. It has to be so. You have to think about a lot about it just before doing it. So for me, it's like the key. How are you going to reach the mind of this professional? Are you going to go with him? How are you going to work with him? How are you going to make the goals for this guy? And choosing about two, they have the same experience, right? You are talking about
Same experience.
I think that just take the one that has the experience in the sport, because he can help you with the sport things also. he can take care more of, okay, I missed this free throw, for example, in basketball. You have to do this one because you missed this free throw. I've been in this same action 10 years ago. I've been living this, so I can tell you how I feel. I tell you how you can come back from this one.
Yeah, Andrea, you
I
wanted
think,
to say something?
yeah, I think line is you are having some expert in sports psychology, not an expert in a sport. You have other people within your team that are experts on the actual sport itself. And so the person who is a sports psychologist has to be expert in sports psychology, irrespective of the sport that they're working with. And I know the boundaries because there was one incident when I was working with a tennis player who had a fundamental flaw in strokes, and it just wasn't a psychological issue. So then you're in a quandary because this player was not going to get better because until he sorted that specific thing out, he was a young player, he was under 16. Until he sorted that thing out, he was always going to break down under pressure. So what then do you do? Do you say, right, I'm employed as your sports psychologist, but actually just let me fix this stroke? You don't do that, do you? You are an expert in psychology at that moment.
Also, an aspect that I will like valorate to choose between these two sports psychologists is like how well do they manage how to surpass or know the limits of the rule. Because maybe an expert of his own sport and has been like a professional player, maybe when he has to do some interventions, maybe it's hard for him to not surpass the limit of you are not a player or you are not a coach, you are just a sports psychology, and there is some things that is not your let's say business. I mean, oh, if I have to fix my stroke because I have one problem technically, is not up to the sports psychologist. Maybe the sports psychologist can help him, but the main thing is with the coach. So if you had a lot of experience as a player or as a professional player or as a coach, you have to be very careful with this. Because for example, happened with me, one of the things that I really worked with that and I was so focused and so important for me was not surpass the limit because I was a tennis coach. So having being a sports psychologist in tennis, one of the goals that I put myself is like no surpass the limit. If there is a player that say, Tony, I have problems with my strokes and I have some technical problems, we say, okay, let's talk to your coach, but I will not fix them. So if this professional know his limits, I will choose him. But also for the players, depend of the players, maybe they like to have a sports psychologist that they don't know about their sport because maybe they get too much information during the day a day about his coach, his mentor. So they maybe need someone who is not an expert in the sport, but yes, into this psychologist.
Yeah, and taking all that, no, I'm taking all that information. I'm going to ask you like the last question just to finish that topic. It's like, no, it's a question from our audience, and it's like, can a sports psychologist work in all kind of sports, or it's better, or should he or she only select like one or two fields or three fields and always moving in three fields, or it's better to be like an expert on only one field, or and not depending on the economic thing, because I know that some sports psychologists they are working in different fields because it's an economic thing. No, it's like you can work in, you can select whatever. What do you think is better? Like being only in one, two fields, being in just in the expert of football, tennis, basketball.
I think that at the beginning, for getting some experience, maybe I will tell like try to experience as much sport as you can. But the more experience you have, maybe you can select two or three fields and then get so good at it. And also just because when you work with different fields, the let's say that the bad thing is like you get overthinking over too much because you have to change your mindset all the time, because okay, I have an e-sport player, so the vocabulary is like this. Now I have a tennis player, my vocabulary is like this. So you have like a lot of fields to go. You have to change your focus all the time, but
Mhm.
also can help you to, if you focus only on tennis, maybe you get like in a dynamic that maybe is not good for the player. So having like other fields that to jump also can help you. So for me, I will always say like have more than one field, like tennis, football, and I don't know, basketball, or something that you have more than one. But at the beginning, try to experience as much as you can. So then you can meet a lot of players, a lot of sports, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you end up in a sport that you really feel comfortable and you didn't know that. It happens to
Mhm.
me that I started to work with a horseball player, and I was like, the first time I was like, what is horseball? And horseball is like this type of basketball that is riding horses. So, oh, I started to work with him because I was open minded, and now working with this type of players is also my comfort zone. So at the beginning, explore your fields and then concrete a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. And now moving to another. Now we are moving to different topics because we have
Mhm.
different questions from the audience. So now I'm going to move to the part of high performance, and that question goes for you, Andrea. Is like, what do you think are the key factors of working with a sport? The key factors of working with high performance athletes as sports psychologists, like the key. What do you think are the key areas or the key skills or the key abilities? If you have to choose some,
The
maybe
key areas
maybe depends.
would be having the right type of motivation. So making sure that they have healthy motivation. So there's a nice mixture of tasks. Now, elite athletes are always going to have a high ego orientation because that's the kind of, usually they will, that's the kind of beast they
Mhm.
are, but that's fine as long as we then balance that with some orientation as well. Having a atmosphere and an environment which fosters healthy rivalry rather than unhealthy rivalry. I
Mhm.
think that's a big thing. Um, Working with injured athletes and all the psychological impact of being injured, especially, depending on the nature of the injury, the time of the season, whether it's a potentially career-ending injury. With the club that I'm working at now, we've had a player that's been out for a year and a half. He had a broken knee, I think it was, a leg, and he's been out for a long time. He's gone back into training, and it's about keeping him engaged and adhering to what the doctors and the sports medicines are saying to him. Um,
Mhm.
Other things would be personal issues. I do really believe that as a sports psychologist, your main thing should be sports psychology, but if you can have a qualification in counselling as well at elite level, a lot of my players are
Mhm.
talking about personal issues. So you have to cope with that. And even if you refer them on, they're coming to you in the first instance. So you have to have those skills so that in the first instance you can deal with it, even if later you would refer that on to someone else. So that's a
Mhm.
big thing.
Mhm.
Um, I think when they're younger, that happens less. But definitely the elite guys that I work with are coming to me more and more um, with mental health, not mental health, but mental well-being issues, I would say.
Mhm.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And now moving fast to another topic. Now, Pablo, my question is about, as your point of view, no, as a part of sports science, do you think that we should um, continue talking about mental health, talk more about the mental health, that encouraging that the athletes talk about mental health, and to make like the role of sports psychologist more common, or do you think it's something more private that has not to be talked, What do you think about that?
I think that now is a must about talking about this. You see a lot of players this year. Yes, you see the World Cup. Some of the players didn't want to play the World Cup of basketball because they decided to get away because of mental health problems. And they said already in public. So I think this is so nice for the sports environment because a lot of people is suffering these problems. A lot of people is scared to say that. A lot of people is doesn't want to do that because okay, I'm winning my money. If I tell them that I'm not in a good shape in mental health, they will kick me out. No, tell you need help. If you continue like this, if you don't have the help of a professional, you will like sunk. You will stop playing. It's happening to a player like 2 hours ago. It happened to a player that he decided to retire from basketball at the age of 24 years old because he's having really big mental problems. He doesn't have help, and he decided to leave the best league in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this is a must that now it has to be common to say, okay, I need a professional for me because uh, I'm having stunts, I'm having a problem now at this moment. I need someone to help me.
Mm-hmm.
So the clubs need to see this. Right? Mental problems nowadays in elite basketball, for example, or elite sports is the main problem. The players can suffer this pressure. They are not able to do it. There is so much pressure, so much load, and everything comes to an end that is so bad, a really bad ending if they don't get the goals that they have in mind.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Yeah, we are still receiving some questions, but we are not able to answer all of them. So I will take them and I will after send it to you to answer it. So, but I have like one last question that is like now, no, in conclusion of all of that round table is like right now, how do you think like sports psychology is, and what is our future challenge from sports psychology? Or for the field of sports psychology? What is your point of view? It's open to anyone. That question is open to
So
anyone.
I think that one of the challenge we have to face is like also that now that we open the door of mental health is like concrete sport that we are going to aim for, because there are a lot of chances open, but I think that they also have the thought of like we are like magicians, like we have like the answer for everything. So I think that one of the challenges that we have is like, okay, now we are like opening the doors. We are getting a lot of chances because we, as a sports psychologist, you can also work in clubs and organizations. But also, I have friend of mine or other people that is sports psychologists that also work, for example, in a gym as a sports psychologist too,
Mhm.
about habits, about motivation. So now that we are aiming for new challenges, one of the challenges is to let's say to stop the thought of we are not magician, we don't have like the truth of everything, we are just here for help. And I think this is one of the challenges we have, because sometimes a lot of families or players say, okay, I'm not playing good just because my mental, and then it's all about it for the sports psychology, so it's all his bad. So we have to reorganize a little bit of these values of how is the sports psychologist, and I think we are going like a good way.
Mm-hmm.
I
So,
also think that one of our main challenges is the social media and how we help players to manage
Yeah.
and their families and the support staff to manage social media. I think that's a huge thing because everybody has an opinion and their opinion is very vocal and very, in the face of the athletes, and they often don't feel they can escape that. So I think that's a
Mhm.
major challenge of how to to cope with social media in this modern age.
mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's necessarily the answer to say switch off all social media. I don't necessarily think that's practical or even doable,
Yeah.
not long term anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. As she said, I think it's so important because as much as it grows the sport and the environment thanks to the technology and also the social media, I think that the challenge is will be always there. You know. So I think it's up to us also to help them, the athletes, how to cope with all the social media, as she said. I think the social media is one of the biggest challenges we have to face, but also for us. But I think that's also for all the professionals that are involved in sport.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree with that because it's not only about athletes, it's also about how sports psychologists work with media or how the performance coach or the coach or the assistant coach work with the media. Because I have saw some sports psychologists that I know that they are really good. When they are not in like exposed, but when they give them a microphone or Twitter or whatever, they send some sentences or some kind of message that I tell them, well, this is not helping our profession. It's like uh, it's you are just making again and again the same mistakes or the same things that people are going to stay thinking that we are only for crazy people, only for that we are like magicians or we have the solution for everything. So it's also I think a challenge for ourselves as a part of our profession or our role. Also, just for finishing, I have some key questions for 30 seconds. For 30 seconds, and the first one is like, Pablo, what is your counsel or your message to someone who wants to start in the sports industry? Like, how? Imagine a student from our master and who is in that master class listening us and is telling you like, okay, I'm a fan, I really love the sports industry, but how I start? What can you tell me?
Just get into everything. Just don't reject any opportunity that you have, even if it's not the thing that you want. Because if you work hard, if you get to a little club, a small club, you will grow, you will grow, you will grow, and you will reach wherever you want. You will start in tennis or in football, and if you want to finish in American football, you will reach. But you first, you don't have to reject anything. Just get in touch with everything that you are able to do the most that you are able to, so you will get to do whatever you want.
Mhm.
The first years are hard, are so hard, but then when you reach that level, that medium level, that high level, you are going to see, okay, I did this the first in my first steps. It was so hard, but I had to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, completely agree. I think that everyone has started, not maybe in the dream club or in the best place of the world, but in some point you have to start. That I think it's also a good counsel. And I have the same, but more specific. And first for you, Tony, and I will finish, and I will end with you, Andrea. Like is like, and for a sports psychologist, what is your counsel, Tony? Like to starting as a sports psychologist.
More like Pablo said, like be open, be open to work with everything, but also in the same way you are open, be conscious of your own limits, because sometimes you say, okay, I'm open, I will work with everything I can, and then you are not aware of your own limitations. Like, okay, my limitation is this, I can afford this, because sometimes the sports psychologist has this limit of, okay, this is clinical, or this is, or this is something that I can afford. So it's
Mhm.
like between be open to take every challenge, like be confident for yourself, but also respect your limits of your role.
Mhm. Perfect. And just for ending, Andrea, what's your final thought of that student who is asking you like how I start as a sports psychologist?
I think you have to have a very clear goal, but be very flexible in how you get to that goal. And also reflect, always reflect, critically reflect on what you do so that you're constantly learning. And also remember that there are many ways to become a sports psychologist. It's not a one size fits all. There are many ways that lead you to your path. And so take, like the others have said today, take every opportunity that you're given and network and talk and ask questions and just be open to as many experiences as you can possibly be.
Mhm. Yeah, completely agree with the three of you. Like it's like a jumping no to the part that you don't know out of your comfort zone, but also knowing your own limits because if not, maybe you crash into the floor and it's quite hard not to stand up. So it's like going out of the comfort zone with clear objective, but not taking the good distances for different risks. So well, we don't have more time. I have more questions. I know that the people who is watching us maybe have more questions, but that's all for me. It's like 10 minutes and round table, but it's like 1 hour. So thanks a lot for coming. Thanks a lot for sharing your experience. I know that some of you are going to continue in our master for this year. I hope for the next year. So I know that you are going to continue explaining your experience, and also more theoretical parts of the sports psychology and the sports science in our master lectures. And for all our audience, yes, thanks a lot for coming. Thanks a lot for your questions, because we have like a good chat with a lot of questions with different thoughts. So thanks a lot for coming. Thanks a lot for listening. And for any question, any inquiry that you maybe have about our master, about that round table or whatever, just write to us. And these questions are going to receive that questions, and as soon as possible we will answer you. And I hope that some of our future students are here listening us. And so thanks a lot for coming. Thanks a lot for everyone. Thanks a lot, Tony, Andrea, Pablo. And thanks a lot for all the audience and for the Real Madrid School and Universidad Europea for making that possible. So thanks a lot, and hope to see you as soon as possible. So bye-bye, and thank you.
Bye.
Bye.